Hello and welcome to the live weekly warm-up where I go over a warm-up exercise and challenge you to try it in your warm-up for the week and see what kind of results you get. This week we're doing something kind of fun, maybe partially for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I know most schools have the day off, which is super exciting. I always love a good day off. But why this is special for today is because this is probably one of the most popular school warm-ups I find, where a lot of schools all across the country do this exercise in some form or another. So instead of explaining it first, I'm actually going to go ahead and start with a demonstration and see if you recognize this exercise. Great, so if you didn't recognize that exercise, you probably know it as either 1A or maybe F Remingtons. And it's a super popular exercise. It's somewhat similar to one of my favorite warm-up exercises, which I call Christmas Tree, where it's the same idea, but you start on a low note and then go up chromatically, and it also doesn't have the rests. I want to talk about some sort of misconceptions with this exercise and some tips that might help you the next time you're playing this in your band and you're doing a full group warm-up. So first of all, I think in high school, I was exactly like this too, where a lot of people misconstrue the purpose of warming up, where we think it's sort of like an exercise warm-up where we want to like stretch out, get warmed up so we don't pull anything, but it's not really like that at all. It's perhaps possible to pull something playing the clarinet, but it's very unlikely. So it's not so much about warming up per se, it's more about working on these fundamental things. So when you're doing this 1A exercise, I want you to be thinking about the fundamentals of playing the instrument. It's not just this boring exercise where you play a note and then go down and back up and down and back up that your band director tells you to do and has the whole group do. There's actually lots of purpose and lots that you can get out of this if you're being picky and paying close attention to how you're playing the instrument. So the first thing to think about is getting a very good, clear start to the note. Even if I was practicing this and I was practicing it on my own, I might restart a few times if I got any weird starts, like where there's a little scoop into it. I would go until I can get a very clean and reliable, super crystal clear start. The next thing to be thinking about is having a very steady sustain so that there's no wobbling or no unsteadiness and nothing changes even when we move between notes as well. So make sure there isn't any like anything weird happening throughout the duration of the note. It's just one clean block of sound that's moving pitch around down and back up. And then the final thing to maybe be thinking about, or the second to last thing actually, is to coordinate your fingers very well. So when you're going down to like the C sharp or the D sharp or E flat, making sure that you're really coordinated between those fingers so that there's no extra stuff happening in between. And then the final thing to think about is getting a nice finish on each one. There's those rests in between in the traditional like 1A exercise, and those rests serve a good purpose to practice ending notes and starting notes. And that brings me to the other thing that I want to talk about, which is how to do warm-ups in a group in general. So if I was doing it on my own and I didn't like how I started a note, I would just stop and try again. If I didn't like how I moved in between notes, I would go back to the note and try the transition between notes again. But obviously, when you're warming up with a group and everybody's playing the same exercise, you can't do that. So I want to talk about some things to be thinking about and some of the purpose of a group warm-up. So first and foremost, the big trick to this exercise is going to be breathing together as a group and starting that first note together. So that's why it's so important to practice on your own so you can reliably get that first note to come out predictably, consistently, the way that you want, right at the beginning of the note all the time. So that when you're in the group, you can do that with everybody else. Everybody's going to have their own idea of how to start a note and where the note starts, and it's up to you to listen to everybody else and make sure that you're fitting in perfectly with them. This applies also, of course, to any of your music that you might be playing, where you'll have lots of entrances as a group that have to be right together. The next thing to be thinking about when you're in a group is listening to the sound in terms of intonation and also the tone. So this is an important distinction. Intonation has to do with your pitch with the tuner, so if you're sharp or flat. This is a little bit trickier to hear because it takes a lot of practice to be able to hear the pitch other people are playing, hear the pitch you're playing, and then hear if there's any discrepancies in the actual pitch or tuning of the note. Then the tone is a little bit easier to hear, but equally as important to be paying attention to, that you're balancing and matching tone. If you have one person in a group or a handful of people playing with a very soft, sort of transparent tone, just a very warm, cushy, light tone, and then you have some people playing with a very like sharp, aggressive, projecting tone, then it'll make a difference and you'll hear some people sound like they're sticking out. Maybe it'll sound like they're out of tune even if they aren't really out of tune. Chances are they may be out of tune as well, but that other tone will be sticking out from everybody else's tone. So that's the second big thing to be thinking about, is how you're blending and tuning with everybody around you. Then the third thing to be thinking about is how you finish. Maybe everybody does a ending where there's a little bit of a push at the end, which isn't always the most musical thing, but it happens sometimes and is applicable in some pieces. So it's good to know and good to match that if other people are doing that. Or maybe there's a long taper to it, where it's a very, very elegant, slow taper, or maybe just more of a plain straight release. But in any case, it's important to be listening to those around you so everybody's ending at the same time and nobody's hanging over a little bit or nobody's swelling while everybody else is tapering. So both in our personal practicing, we want to think about how the start of the note is, how the sustain of the note is, and how the end of the exercise and release of the note is. And same things when we're in a group. We want to see if we're all starting together, if we're all sustaining with the same tone and same pitch, and then if we're all releasing in the same shape at the same time. So I hope you find that helpful for practicing and doing warm-up exercises in a group. Remember that you're not practicing or you're not warming up just absent-mindedly to get your muscles going as you might when you're doing a exercise routine. You're actually working on developing your fundamentals, both your individual fundamentals and your group fundamentals. Every good group needs to be able to start notes together, match tone and match pitch, and end notes together if you want to be a great sounding group. So those are the fundamentals that this super simple, super popular exercise is working on. And go ahead and give this video a like if you are familiar with this exercise and if your band does this exercise on a regular basis. I know my band did in high school, and I've worked with many bands and many students who are familiar with this exercise as well. And I think it's a good one. So that's all I have for this week. I hope that's been helpful for you. Don't forget that if you want more warm-up exercises and more information on playing the clarinet, to go to quickstartclarinet.com. There's tons and tons of resources there for you. You can join the free community to get lots of email tips and tricks. There's the Next Generation Clarinet Method book where you can get more in-depth information about all the fundamentals you need for playing, and tons of warm-up exercises and some music exercises as well. And there's lots and lots of stuff over there. So go to quickstartclarinet.com if you want more. You can also follow me on the Facebook or Instagram, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And there's lots of free tips that I'm giving out all the time on those places as well. So thanks so much for watching this, and I'll see you next week in the next live weekly warm-up.